I was 34 years old when I realized I had never once made a decision that was actually mine. That thought hit me on a Tuesday morning, standing in my kitchen, holding a coffee mug I didn't even like, in a job I had chosen because it sounded impressive at family dinners. I remember setting the mug down slowly, like it had suddenly gotten heavier. I worked in operations management for a logistics company in Ohio. Steady paycheck, decent title, nothing wrong with it on paper. I had a routine that ran like clockwork: up at 6, gym at 6:30, emails by 7:30, meetings until lunch, more meetings until 5. I used to tell people I liked structure. I said it so often I started to believe it was true. But that morning, for some reason, I actually asked myself a question I had never asked before: why do I like structure? Not, do I like it? I already assumed I did, but why? I couldn't answer it. And that bothered me more than I expected. I went to work like normal. Sat through a meeting about quarterly shipping delays. Nodded at the right times. But somewhere in the middle of that meeting, I caught myself watching my own hands as I took notes, and I had this strange, detached feeling, like I was watching someone else perform the role of me. I didn't say anything to anyone. I just kept noticing things. Later that week, my coworker Danielle mentioned she was thinking about quitting to start a small ceramics business. People at the table laughed, not cruelly, just the automatic laugh people give when someone says something impractical. I laughed too. Then I stopped laughing almost immediately, because I realized I didn't actually think it was a bad idea. I thought it sounded kind of brave. But my mouth had already reacted before my mind had a chance to. That was the first crack. I started paying attention to how often I did that, reacted before I actually thought. The strange part wasn't Danielle's decision. It was mine. I began noticing a pattern in myself that I couldn't explain. Certain words made me tense up before I even processed their meaning. Certain situations made me agree, apologize, or shrink back, and I never once asked myself if that reaction made sense. It was automatic. Like a program running quietly in the background, and I had never opened the code to see what it said. I started asking, in almost every decision that week, is this what I want, or is this just what I always do? It's a small question. But once I asked it, I couldn't stop asking it. I remember one night, about 2 weeks into this, sitting in my car in the parking garage after work, not driving anywhere. Just sitting there. I called my mother, mostly out of habit, and somewhere in the conversation she said something she'd said 100 times before: you've always been the responsible one. Even as a kid, you never wanted to cause trouble. I used to hear that as a compliment. That night, it landed differently. It sounded less like a description of who I was, and more like an instruction I had absorbed so early I forgot it was ever given to me. I sat in that garage for almost 40 minutes after the call ended. I started thinking back, really thinking back, to when I was around 8 or 9. My older brother used to get in trouble a lot, loud arguments, slammed doors, my parents exhausted and short-tempered. And I remember, very clearly, deciding that I was not going to be like that. I was going to be easy, quiet, agreeable. I was going to make myself small enough that nobody ever had a reason to be upset with me. I had built an entire adult identity, my job, my habits, even the way I spoke to people, on a decision an 8-year-old made to avoid conflict in a house that already had enough of it. That was the turning point. Not a big dramatic event. Just a quiet, uncomfortable recognition sitting alone in a parked car. I didn't feel proud of it. If anything, I felt a little embarrassed, like I'd been caught pretending to be someone I wasn't, except no one had caught me, I had caught myself. The weeks after that were strange. I started noticing the program everywhere. In how quickly I said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. In how I picked friends who needed very little from me emotionally, because deep down I think I was scared of being a burden. In how I chose a career that let me control outcomes, because unpredictability used to scare me as a kid, and it apparently still did. None of this made me angry at my younger self, or at my parents. That surprised me. I expected blame to show up somewhere, but it didn't. What showed up instead was something closer to sympathy, for a kid who did the best thing he knew how to do with the information he had at the time. He wasn't wrong to protect himself. He just never updated the strategy once he grew up. I started testing small things. Deliberately. Not big life explosions, nothing like quitting my job the next day or cutting people off. Just small, honest experiments. I told a coworker, calmly, that I disagreed with a decision in a meeting, instead of nodding along like usual. My chest actually tightened doing it, like my body expected punishment for something that small. Nothing happened. He just said, "Fair point, let's revisit it," and the meeting moved on. I told Danielle her ceramics idea sounded genuinely good, not just supportive sounding good. She looked surprised, like she wasn't used to people meaning it. I said no to a weekend favor I would have normally said yes to automatically, and I felt guilty for almost 2 full days afterward, even though nothing bad came of it. Each of these felt small and slightly ridiculous to even mention out loud. But they weren't really about the actions themselves. They were about noticing the gap between what I actually wanted and what I had been trained, a long time ago, to do instead. That's the part nobody really talks about. We assume our personality is just who we are, fixed, natural, obviously us. But a lot of it is closer to a program we installed early, usually to survive some environment that no longer exists. And the unsettling thing is, the program keeps running long after the reason for it disappears. I'm not saying I fixed everything. I still catch myself slipping into old patterns, agreeing too fast, shrinking a little in certain conversations, feeling guilty over ordinary boundaries. But now, at least, I notice it happening. That noticing changes something. It's the difference between reacting on autopilot and actually choosing. A psychologist once described something similar to me in a completely different context, the idea that most of our adult behavior isn't really us responding to the present moment, it's an old version of us responding to an old situation, using the only tools we had back then. I think about that a lot now. It also changed how I see other people. When someone snaps at me, or avoids conflict, or over-explains something small, I don't take it quite as personally anymore. I find myself wondering what program they might be running, and what younger version of them built it, and why. It doesn't excuse everything. But it makes people easier to understand, and harder to resent. I still work in logistics. I didn't quit and reinvent myself into someone unrecognizable. That's not really what this was about. What changed is quieter than that. I ask myself that same question now, almost daily: is this me, or is this just the program? And more often than before, I actually wait for the answer instead of letting the old reflex answer for me. Sometimes I think about that morning in the kitchen, holding a mug I didn't even like. I still have that mug, actually. I kept it on purpose. It reminds me that most of what we assume is personality is really just habit wearing a very convincing disguise. I still don't know how much of me is truly me, and how much is still leftover code from a kid trying to keep the peace in a house that isn't even there anymore. But I've stopped assuming the answer is obvious. Maybe that's the real question worth sitting with, not who you are, but how much of who you are, you actually chose.